Over the past few months, I've been making a series on YouTube Shorts, Twitter clips, Instagram Reels, and TikToks about the best player of every character in Smash Bros. Ultimate. Today, I will officially complete the series, releasing episode 84, wrapping up my last thoughts, and offering the question of what's next. But for right now, I figured that I wanted to bring my series onto my main channel. After all, while there is some overlap between my shorts audience and my long-form video audiences, there's still a lot of people who are only one or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if you watching this video had no idea I was even making this series on YouTube Shorts ever since November 16th of 2023. By the way, as a side note, I started my series before Hungrybox made his video about the same topic, just in case you were confused. Back on topic though, I wanted to bridge the gap between my shorts audience and my long form audience, as well as bringing this iconic series over to my long form content somehow. So for today's video, I will basically be jamming every single short I've made in this entire series into one video and posting it. Full disclosure, this video has the potential to get a tad clunky, as it's 84 episodes of a series meant to be viewed individually, all being crammed together into one video. But I still wanted to do this, and I think it'll be a fun, easy video. Just a reminder before we begin that if you want to support me monetarily, you can do so by using links to my Patreon or channel memberships in the description below. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. Without further ado, this is the best player of every character in Smash Bros. Ultimate. The best player of every character in Smash Ultimate, Part 1, Mario. The best Mario player in the world is no doubt Kurama, who has gotten prestigious placements like 7th place at Crown the Third and a 4th place finish at Smash Summit 6. However, the tournament that will forever cement Kurama as a legend is the Ludwig Smash Invitational, where Kurama had a phenomenal run to 3rd place after only qualifying through the last chance qualifier, defeating T Game 5, Zachary 3-0, Gluttony 3-0, Spargo Game 5, Cola 3-1, and Shuton 3-1, losing only to MKLeo, Akola, and DeBuzz all in 3-1 sets. As far as other notable Marios go, shoutouts go to both Now and Snow, a pair of Marios that have both been making big waves over in Japan. Stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 2, Donkey Kong. This one is a little bit trickier, since Donkey Kong's best result ever was undoubtedly Hikaru's run at Ultimate Fighting Arena 2022, where Hikaru defeated Leon 3-1, Gluttony 3-2, Bloom Forever 3-2, before losing to T 3-1 and Gluttony 3-2 in the run back in Losers Finals. However, the main issue here is that Hikaru is pretty much retired these days and isn't a Donkey Kong main, which calls into question my criteria for this series to begin with. So here's my rule. In order for a player to be considered for this series, they have to play the certain character as at least a co-main. So with that established, and given the fact that Hikaru is pretty much retired now, my pick for best Donkey Kong will actually go to Chunky Kong, whose best placement was their 7th place finish at MomoCon 2023, where Chunky Kong defeated Hyper Kirby, Murph, and Cosmos all in Game 5 sets. Follow me and stay tuned for the next few episodes. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 3, Link. Now, obviously, the Link player who used to be the best was T, the letter, not the drink, who caused waves with the character back in Smash's early days. But T doesn't play anymore, so who is the current best Link? Well, we don't even have to move out of Japan to find out. The best Link in the world is Kyon, who had their massive breakout performance only 7 months ago at Winner Next number 3, where Kyon defeated Abadango, Shogun, Noi, and Tamaigo, getting 3rd place after losing to Umeki and Jagaimo, both in extremely close Game 5 sets. And by the way, he did this on his birthday. Ever since that performance, Kyon has been a big threat to Japanese Smash and has continued to make their name known, consistently top-8ing Japanese nationals and regionals, and even taking sets off of international visitors, like when Kyon defeated Skyjay. Follow me and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 4, Samus. This is where things can get a little bit controversial, as people will no doubt debate whether or not the title of Best Samus should go to Siski from Spain or Yara from Japan. But if I was lame, I could separate it between Samus and Dark Samus, but that's no fun. If you ask me, Siski and Yara both have comparable peaks, with Yara having a slight edge since they've beaten Spargo before, with Siski just barely not upsetting Spargo, but with each of them having equally impressive feats under their belts. So for this, I'm actually going to consult Shoe Stats, a somewhat objective ranking of players based on points gained from placements and notable wins. Using this, we can see that Yara has almost twice as many points as Siski does, cementing their spot as the best Samus. But for what it's worth, I think Siski is actually really close to Yara. And additionally, I have to give a shout out to Quick, my German goat, and Icy Mist, who is one of my favorite players to see do well at a tournament. Follow me and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Ultimate Part 5, Yoshi. It's Yoshidora, obviously. I mean, look at this graphic. Yoshidora has almost twice as many points as any other Yoshi on this entire board. We all know that the best Yoshi in the world is Yoshidora. But what about some other notable ones? In North America, each of the big countries actually has their own phenomenal Yoshi player, with the best one in Canada being Burst, the best one in Mexico being Mei, but with the best Yoshi in America being a bit more of a controversial topic. Me personally, I love to spread Kansas City propaganda wherever I go, so my shoutout is going to go to Justin23 from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 6, Kirby. This is a really hard one to do, as I'm mostly torn between two Kirbys, those two being J-Jaw from the States and Gyelhu from Mexico. The two of them have pretty similar peaks, and looking at shoe stats, the two are nearly tied in points, with Gyelhu having a very slight edge. Even their head-to-head doesn't tell us much, as even though J-Jaw is up 3-1 lifetime on Gyelhu, they've only ever fought online, and the only time it was a BO5 set was the one that Gyelhu won. For what it's worth, I think these players are pretty much tied skill-wise, and it comes down to a razor's edge, but I'm gonna give the slight edge to Gyelhu, since I think Gyelhu has slightly better wins against top players, defeating players like Javi, Cloudy, Chag, Nair, and even Meister. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Ultimate Part 7, Fox. We all know that the best Fox in the world is Light, but did you know that Solo Fox didn't ever win a major until SmashCon Fall Fest 2022? It's one of the best losers runs in Ultimate history, and in my opinion, one of the greatest tournaments that Smash Ultimate has ever had. Light, who was the 6th seed of the event, had good wins over Suarez and Aaron, but was upset by Jackal in a 3-0 loss right after this, going into losers extremely early. Light then went on a crazy losers run, first defeating Pink Fresh 3-1, before next beating Mars, Cola, MVD, and Meister, all in extremely close Game 5 sets, going up into Grand Finals and 3-0ing Spargo in Grands before winning in one more extremely close Game 5 set in the Grands reset, becoming the first solo Fox to ever win a major. By the way, in terms of other talented Foxes, shout out to Kananabe, who became the only other Fox in recent Smash Ultimate history to top 8 a major at Port Priority 8. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 8, Pikachu. The best Pikachu in the world is no doubt Shiny Mark, and for any doubters out there, looking at shoe stats, we can see that Shiny Mark has over twice as many points as the second highest Pikachu, Esam. And for those of you who think Shiny Mark is just a Wi-Fi warrior, let's not forget about Shiny Mark's impressive offline placements as well, like his 3rd place finish at Delfino Mazza 2023, where he defeated Mustaine and Gact 3-1, as well as Gluttony and Skyjay in Game 5 sets. Or Shiny Mark's very recent 1st place finish at Blink Respawn 2023 in the DR, where Shiny Mark double eliminated both Ling and MK Big Boss to take 1st place. In terms of personal shoutouts, I'm gonna give mine to Neros from France and Fried Rice from Australia. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 9, Luigi. I have a feeling that this episode is going to be a tad bit controversial, so let's just rip the band-aid off, shall we? The best Luigi in the world is Rarukun from Japan. I know, I was half expecting it to be Luigi as well, but looking at shoe stats, technically speaking, Luigi is 4th on the list, being beneath Rarukun, Yaman Action, and even Waka. And I mean, looking at Luigi's player head-to-heads, his best wins are probably versus Gluttony and Siski, and maybe even Bloom Forever, but they fight all the time at UK locals and regionals. Rarukun, on the other hand, not only has more impressive wins, but has a lot more of them, defeating Yoshidora before and even having a positive record on Ashimo. Rarukun also has wins over players like Kyan, Umeki, Aaron, Kananabe, Mr. R, Toriguri, Takara, Sasusoro, Ryuo, Jogibu, Kurage, and Kome, as well as top 8ing many important Japanese tournaments. And given all of that, my pick for best Luigi is going to Rarukun. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 10, Ness. The best Ness in the world is Gact from Japan, who not only has the most points from shoe stats, but also has the best recent placements at important tournaments. Gact has made top 8 at lots of Japanese majors, but in my opinion, the most impressive one was his performance at Mayasuma Top 12, where Gact defeated Riddles 3-1 along with Shuton and T in Game 5 sets, losing to Akola and Mia, the two best players in Japan, if not the entire world. This tournament marked the end of Gact's slump and returned to prominence, and ever since then, Gact has made great placements consistently in Japan, and even has top 8'd some important NA tournaments, most notably Delfino Fino Mazza 2023, where Gak defeated Chag, Jazar, Meister, and Siski. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 11, Captain Falcon. The best Captain Falcon in the world is Jogibu, and I know, I've been reading the comments on the last few episodes, and you guys have already accused me of being way too favored towards Japan, but just hear me out. Because of the precedent I set with Hikaru in the Donkey Kong episode, I won't be considering inactive, retired, or banned players for these shorts. And if you didn't know, Fatality retired in 2022. In his own words, he's focusing on content creation and Street Fighter 6, and goes to tournaments only to chill or vibe with friends, not to compete, and therefore doesn't qualify for this series. With that said, the other two big Captain Falcon players are Jogibu and Karage from Japan, and honestly, you could interchange them in terms of their peaks and good wins. But consulting shoe stats, Jogibu has over 1,000 more points than Karage, so he gets my pick for the best Captain Falcon. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 12, Jigglypuff. The best Jigglypuff in the world is Base Mage, who not only has the most points on shoe stats by quite a bit, but also has made the biggest waves at tournaments. Take Terra, for instance, where Base Mage defeated players like Takara and Siski for a final placement of 9th as the 24th seed, or when Base Mage defeated players like Chag at Summit, or when Base defeated Riddles at Rise and Grind. Base even has wins over players like Cola, Ouch, Louis Money, and many, many more. Honestly, out of every episode I've done on this series so far, this one is probably the easiest choice. In terms of shoutouts, one definitely has to go to Senra from Japan, the best Jigglypuff in that region, and another one has to go to Hungrybox. Please, hit me up sometime. Let's talk. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 13, Peach and Daisy. The main two players in contention for Best Peach are Mewtwo and Umeki, who are very close on the shoe stats rankings. Both of them have been improving lately, but in different ways, with Umeki finally reaching very high peaks, but with Mewtwo becoming consistent, constantly top 8ing these important tournaments in spite of hand troubles. Interestingly enough, Mewtwo and Umeki recently fought at Port Priority 8, and it was probably the closest set in that top 8, but Umeki barely pulled it out in the end. However, Dittos aren't really a good determiner of who's better in general. I mostly bring it up just to reiterate that Mewtwo and Umeki, in my opinion, are really close skill-wise, and if you want a compromise, you can always give the best Peach to Mew and the best Daisy to Umeki. But I don't do compromises here, so who's better? Personally, I'm going to give it to Mewtwo, as I think Mewtwo's peaks are a bit higher than Umeki's peaks, and I think that Mewtwo becoming consistent is extremely important in this debate, while Umeki still has a little bit of work to do in terms of consistency. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in the world, Part 14, Bowser. The best Bowser in the world is Hedo, who not only has the most points on shoe stats, being 1,000 points over Leon, but has had better placements at huge tournaments, getting top 8 at multiple Japanese majors, the most notable one being Kagaribi 10, where Hedo got wins on Karage, Yoshi, Yara, and Ken for a final placement of 5th at a super major with solo Bowser. However, I'm going to take a moment to highlight what I created and coined as the Triforce of Bowser mains. A Triforce of mains is when your main has 3 very strong representatives, with one being from NA, one being from Europe, and one being in Japan. A lot of characters have them, and they're quite fun to make. But my Triforce of Bowser mains includes Hedo from Japan, Leon from North America, and Mukuro from Germany. Huge shoutouts goes to all 3 of these players. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 15, Ice Climbers. The best Ice Climbers player in the world is, no question, Big D. No one has taken this character to the peaks that Big D has, but none more impressive than Big D's run at Smash Summit 6. Big D, as the 12th seed, made it all the way to 3rd place, defeating Void, Aaron, Gluttony, Karama, and most impressively, Akola. You don't just beat Akola and Icy Steve without being built different. And while it's no secret that Big D is in somewhat of a slump lately, I think that Big D will pull through it, and I'll be here watching him when he does. In terms of shoutouts, one goes out to Japanese Icy's Futuni no Kiyomi A, and I have to give one to Ledzit, who is a homie of mine from Kansas City. Lastly, shoutout goes to The Gay Agenda, who has possibly the funniest tag I've ever seen in this entire game. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 16, Sheik. Hey, Rister, why does Sheik come before Zelda when Zelda is the one who transforms into Sheik and not the other way around? I don't know. Ask Sakurai. He's the one who has Sheik at 16 and Zelda at 17. I'm just the messenger. This episode might get a tad bit controversial, as despite being ranked number 5 on the Shoe Stats ranking, I'm gonna throw all of that away and say that WebJP is the best Sheik in the world. WebJP has many impressive runs, his two best being his run to 7th at MomoCon 2023 as the 18th seed, but even more so his run at Luminosity Makes Moves Miami 2023, where WebJP got 9th as the 36th seed and defeated Goblin, Light, and Neo. Shoutouts go to Void, who is good but focuses more on content than competing, and I'm, who has the most points on Shoe Stats but has been in a slump lately, while WebJP has been on a meteoric rise, which is why I'm giving Best Sheik to WebJP. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 17, Zelda. The best Zelda in the world is Wine from Japan, and if you're not following Japan's Smash scene like I am, I wouldn't be surprised if you've never even heard of them. Wine has gotten the best placements at important tournaments of any Zelda player, top 8ing many important Japanese tournaments and racking up wins and impressive upsets against some of their top players. Additionally, Wine does have the most points on Shoe Stats, but it's actually closer than you might think with some of the other top Zeldas. In terms of shoutouts, one definitely goes to Ven, who is the best Zelda in NA, and additionally I'm going to give one to Naskino because it's really cool to see some European representation, and Naskino has actually top 8'd several big EU tourneys before. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 18, Dr. Mario. The best Dr. Mario in the world is Jazar from Mexico, who is mostly known as an online Wi-Fi grinder, but has tremendous offline placements as well, like a 2nd place finish at Rey del Agua, as well as placing 2nd at Combo City, 1st at Smash Ace, and 3rd at Bitmaster 11. On top of all of this, Jazar has the most points on Shoe Stats, though I do want to remind you all that that's not my end-all be-all deciding factor. In terms of shoutouts, one goes out to Sumo Suto in Japan, as well as Poppin, who is a homie of mine from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 19, Pichu. The best Pichu in the world is Neytoru from France, despite Neytoru actually being listed at 2nd place on Shoe Stats, but again, that isn't my end-all be-all, just my jumping off point. Neytoru has long been one of the best players in France, and indeed, perhaps all of Europe, consistently top 8ing important European tournaments and making big upsets, perhaps the most famous of which being Neytoru's win over MK Leo at Ultimate Fighting Arena 2023. In terms of shoutouts, I'm going to give 2, both being to fellow Europeans. The first going to Yeti, who also co-mains Min Min with Pichu, and the second going to Dryby, a German Pichu player. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 20, Falco. The best Falco in the world, no question, is Little Z, who has been dominating his local— I'm just kidding! Don't click off, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Little Z, but this one commenter has been telling me to make this joke on literally all of my shorts, and who am I to tell the commenter now? In reality, though, the question for Best Falco falls to a debate between either Tilde, Masa, or Motsunabe, with Masa and Motsunabe both being from Japan and Tilde being from the US. Tilde did get 3rd at GOML 2023, which I think is very impressive, but Tilde doesn't have nearly as good top player wins as Masa and Motsunabe do. Masa and Motsunabe are actually both really close in terms of good placements and top player wins, so for this one I'm actually going to consult Shoe Stats, where we can see that Masa has over 2,000 more points than Motsunabe does, so I'm going to give Best Falco to Masa. Shoutout goes to Larry Lur. We should totally collab sometime, if you want to. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 21, Marth. Now, Marth is an interesting case because his best reps aren't actually Marth mains. When you think of Marth, you probably either think of Rizeyasu or MK Leo. But like I established in my episode on Donkey Kong, in order to be considered for this series, you have to be at least a co-main of that character. So I will not be considering Leo for this episode. Looking at Rizeyasu's character usage in tournament, I would describe him as a Marth and Byleth co-main with a Mii Brawler secondary and about 5 or so other pocket characters. Looking at major tournaments, especially recently, Rizeyasu has actually been using mostly Marth, even more so than Byleth. Looking at Shoe Stats, we can even see that Rizeyasu has more points with the character than Marth mains Ignace, Krieg, or Stretch. So for all these reasons, I'm giving Best Marth to Rizeyasu. Shoutouts to Ignace, who is really good, but if you didn't see, has actually announced today that they're going to be dropping Marth entirely for Yoshi, but we're gonna have to see if they actually commit to this or not. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 22, Lucina. This one is really hard because we all know that the best Lucina in the world is Proto Banham, no question. I mean, for goodness sake, look at shoe stats. Proto quite literally has over double of anyone else in the top 5 here, and I'm not just saying that because he's my favorite player. However, I'm put in a real pickle here because you could very easily make the argument that Proto Banham is inactive and therefore doesn't qualify for this series. I mean, his last tournament was on October 28th, and it's December now. But also, inactivity might not be Proto's fault, as we all know that he struggles with medical issues, which is why he had to drop out of Watch the Throne. Personally, I don't consider Proto to be inactive yet. He's almost there, but for the sake of this video, I'm gonna say that he's not and give Best Lucina to Proto. Shoutouts go to Mr. E, who made top 8 at the Big House 11 recently, and to Leon, the French one, who is one of my favorite players to see succeed. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 23, Young Link. This one is pretty dang hard, as there's quite literally 7 Yinks you could make the argument is the best. Let's go over them one by one and eliminate them from the running as I do. Me going over them will kinda be the shoutouts for today's video. Suinoko has been suffering from a sharp decline in results lately, and Elago just doesn't quite have the top tier wins and placements, but should be noted as the Yink that's on the biggest come up right now. Skittles is somewhat region locked and doesn't go to majors anymore, and Toast also doesn't travel much but admittedly has good placings when he does. And lastly, Kobe has the best peaks of any Yink but massively struggles with consistency, having quite a few 49ths and 33rds. That leaves us with J Dizzle and Super Semi, who I think are the 2 best Yinks. Of these 2 though, I'm gonna give the slight edge to Super Semi for more important placings at EU tourneys and wins over top players like MKLeo. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 24, Ganondorf. This one is harder than you might expect, and we have a lot of contenders to go over, but let's get the easy ones out of the way first. Gungnir is a Japanese player with a long list of good wins, including Amawatsu and Hedo, but is effectively retired as of recently, and so doesn't qualify for this series. Hige-chan is a Japanese Ganondorf player who, theoretically, has the best wins over anyone else in contention for best Ganon. He's beaten Yara, Oi George, Hedo, and even beat Akola. But these are Hige-chan's online results. As far as offline goes, he's beaten Atelier, but that's about it. Since I value offline results more than online, let's keep looking. Major is the only Ganon here not from Japan who's gotten amazing wins over players like Mr. E, Jada, Ludo, MFA, and more, as well as notable placements like 3030 UFA and top 8 in Cascadia Clash. The race for best Ganon is primarily between Major and our last contender, Komegura, another Japanese Ganon that boasts the character's best ever offline placement, 25th at a Major, as well as wins over players like Reno, Jagaimo, Nizemamo, Masha, and more. I think Major and Komegura are actually pretty close, and their wins are near the same level. However, I'm going to give the slight edge to Komegura for their 25th place finish at a Major and give them the title of best Ganondorf. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 25, Mewtwo. This one isn't as hard as you may think. Many people will assume that Mewtwo just doesn't have any players, but that actually kind of makes it easier rather than harder, strangely enough. A lot of people would say that Goryoka from Japan is the best Mewtwo, and he does have the most points on shoe stats. However, as I've said many times, I only consider co-mains or above for this series, and I would consider Mewtwo to be a secondary or a counterpick for Goryoka, not a co-main, and therefore not eligible for this series. So with that said, my pick for best Mewtwo is going to Remrin from Canada, who has the second most points, and since she's the most prominent player of the character. Shoutouts go to Grade, who is also from Canada, Tim Prater from St. Louis, as well as Anvil. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 26, Roy. This one might be the only episode of this series where everyone will agree with me, I hope. The best Roy in the world is Cola, and oh my goodness, am I glad to be saying that. Remember, ever since MomoCon 2023, Cola was taking a big break from Smash Bros, and for a hot minute, I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to include him in this series because I was afraid he'd retire or go permanently inactive. But thankfully, Cola is back, and at his first major back, Luminosity Makes Moves Miami 2023, he got 5th place and almost got a guaranteed 3rd if he had won Game 5 versus Spargo. After months gone, he just shows up and does that. Imagine how good he'll do once the rust fully comes off. As far as shoutouts go, one goes to Alice from Japan, who is the only other Roy top-8ing majors right now, Flo from France, who I made an entire video dedicated to, and lastly Javi from Mexico, who I also made an entire video dedicated to. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 27, Chrom. This may be the hardest episode I've ever made. The main 2 contenders being Lax from Japan and Lancelot, who's the best player in Finland. Lax's big breakout was his 5th place finish at Wave number 5 and his 3rd place finish at Maisuma Top 13.5, as well as a 7th place finish at Delta 3. He's also got wins on top Japanese players like Doramigi, Motsunabe, Masa, Pasediman, Umeki, Toriguri, and has even beat Zomba.
However, Lax misses top 8 at majors more often than not. Lancelot is way more consistent, getting really solid placements at EU majors, but also missing out on top 8 when it matters most. His best recent result was VCA 2023, where he actually went mostly Roy. That's another issue, as Lancelot seems to be playing more and more Roy and less Chrom. Lancelot's beaten players like Quick, Yaka, Tarek, Longo, and more, but he doesn't have nearly as high of peaks and is basically a co-main now, while Lax is a Chrom main through and through. Lancelot has consistency and a lot of solid placements, but Lax has way higher peaks and better wins. Ultimately, I think Lax's resume is more impressive, and he's got over 1,000 more points on shoe stats, so I'm gonna give Best Chrom to Lax. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Ultimate Part 28, Mr. Game & Watch. Well, I was gonna say that Mia was the best Game & Watch, but I don't want you guys to accuse me of being favored towards Japan again, so I guess I'm just kidding. Mia is the best. I mean, for goodness sake, the difference is so big. Mia has nearly twice as many points as anyone else on shoe stats. We all know that Mia is the best Game & Watch in the world. However, I want to take a moment to give a massive shout out to Meister. Meister gets so much crap from the community, and most of it is pretty unfair to the guy. Meister has undergone somewhat of a redemption lately, as his appearances on Luminosity's channel really show that he's just a cool guy. And Meister is one of 2 players, the other being DeBuzz, that I need to see win a major before Ultimate ends. Gonna give some other shoutouts to Monty from the States, Furaradaman from Japan, who co-mains Game & Watch and Isabel, Ploopy from Kansas City, who's in my scene, and lastly, I want to give a very special shoutout to Frito, who was the best player in Chile. Rest in peace, you legend. Follow and stay tuned for more parts.
The best player of every character in Smash Part 29, Meta Knight. You guys must be really confused about what's happening right now. I'm sorry about this. I released an original of this short, but I messed it up, alright? I was running out of time because I was going to a local tonight and I didn't do enough research. It's entirely my bad. And the player I ended up picking is banned in his scene and therefore not eligible for this series. Abadongo is also retired, so he doesn't qualify for this series either. So the best Meta Knight in the world is Matara from Japan because he has wins on Mia at Kaigaribi 10 and on Neo at China's Tournament Pro 2. Shoutouts go to Show from the United States, who's keeping the character alive over in NA. But other than that, follow and stay tuned for more parts. I'm really sorry about this. It won't happen again.
The best player of every character in Smash Part 30, Pit and Dark Pit.
Man, I'm still thinking about yesterday's episode. What a crap show that was.
The best Pit in the world is everyone's favorite Japanese player, Zachary, who I would consider to be at least a co-main of Pit after playing solo Pit for months and placing 3rd at a super major with him, as well as having the most points on shoe stats by quite a big margin. Pit is kind of funny because his best players don't really solo main him. The best solo Pit player probably being Tet from Japan, but since co-mains qualified, the best Pit goes to Zachary. Shoutouts go to Silver from Canada, who plays Pit with Wii Fit, as well as Raze from Australia, who plays Pit with Link. Both of those players are cracked, and I would consider them to be 2nd and 3rd best. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 31, Zero Suit Samus. The best ZSS in the world is everyone's favorite pajama-clad content creator, Mars. Mars is a weird player because he has the weird ability to, after not doing so for months, just go to any major he wants to and defeat any player he wants to. And while I wish Mars attended more majors, his attendance was definitely good enough for this series, so the best ZSS is going to Mars. He's also got the most points on shoe stats, but I mean, you didn't need me to tell you that, did you? Shoutouts go to Doorstop, who is leading the character's meta right now, Shu, who is one of my favorite players of all time, as well as Durelius and Happy, both of them being homies from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 32, Wario. Okay, forget what I said about the Roy video. This episode is probably going to be the most unanimously agreed upon. The best Wario in the world is the champion of the French Dimension, Gluttony, who has been a near top 5 player this season, winning all sorts of important tournaments, and most importantly, winning Terra near the beginning of the ranking season. Shoutouts go to Loaf from the United States, the best Wario in NA, and who is Lucky the Piranha Plant's brother, if you didn't know. Additional shoutout goes to Uraromote from Japan, who is the Wario player on the biggest come-up right now. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 33, Snake. This episode is really hard to decide because it's the age-old debate of consistency over peaks. Hurt, who has the most points on shoe stats, by the way, has undoubtedly the greatest peak of any Snake player at Delta number 5, where Hurt defeated Ken, Yara, Mia, and even took a set over Akola, the only player not named Spargo to do so since Smash Summit 6. although Hurt would lose the reset, but in a Game 5. And even though Hurt does have some pretty good other results, they're not as good as our other contender, Apollo Kage. AK is far more consistent, but that consistency is usually within the 13th to 9th range at majors, not top 8s. But AK does have really good wins on players like Gluttony, MKLeo, and Light several times. Personally, I'm gonna give it to Apollo Kage, because after all, consistency is very important. It's why Akola was ranked over Spargo on LumiRank in 2022 after all. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 34, Ike. So getting this out of the way first, because I know people are going to bring it up, the best Ike in the world used to be Yez, who, even to this day, still has the most points on shoe stats. However, earlier this year, Yez officially retired, or at least temporarily retired, and therefore, Yez doesn't qualify for this series. But that's fine, because the best Ike in the world right now is Tora, previously known as Tora-san, from Japan. She has great wins over players like Gact and has even defeated Akola's Roy before, widely considered Ike's worst matchup, played by debatably the best player in the world, though admittedly this tournament probably didn't end up counting for rankings. Shoutouts go to Neo from Kansas City, who I meant to mention in my Roy video. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 35, Pokemon Trainer. The main two picks here are either Quid or DD, and once again, it's a battle of peaks versus consistency. You all know Quid for his victory at LMBM 2022, where he became the lowest seed ever to win a major, placing first as the 32nd seed. However, his performances after this haven't quite matched it, with a 33rd at next year's iteration and a 17th at LMMM 2023. But it certainly hasn't been all bad by any means. DD, who just so happens to have more points on shoe stats, is a far more consistent player, with the crowning achievements for him being 3rd at MomoCon 2023 and 7th at Super Smash Con 2023. However, even though the PT is good, DD's best wins are actually with Steve, with DD being a PT Steve co-main. For that reason, my pick for best PT is going to Quid. Shoutouts go to Atelier from Japan, a Wolf PT co-main, Beast, who is actually a Charizard main, and lastly Shadzix from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 36, Diddy Kong. It's Tweak. Come on, you know it, I know it, we all know it. Tweak is the best Diddy Kong. I mean, for goodness sake, the guy is up for debate as the best player in America, so he's naturally going to be the best player of any character he plays. Well, almost any. Tweak has become extremely consistent in recent times, avoiding upsets and constantly making top 8 at major after major after major, but with his most recent major win being Port Priority 7. Huge shoutout goes to Ryuo from Japan, the second best Diddy in the world right now, who has been getting really good lately, even recently taking a Game 5 set over Yoshidora. Other shoutouts go to Aaron from the US, one goes to Jix from Australia, and one goes to Claw from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 37, Lucas. The best Lucas in the world is Nighthawks, who just so happens to have the most points on shoe stats, but again, that's not my end-all be-all. Nighthawks is the most consistent bracket threat when it comes to Lucas, and we all know how algorithms don't really think very highly of Europe, so Nighthawks being first on shoe stats as a Frenchman is pretty impressive when you think about it. Huge shout out goes to Lucas runner-up Regalo, who was an inch away from making top 8 at a major, placing 9th at Super Smash Con 2023. This is Lucas's best ever peak, but again, I value consistency over peaks. Other shoutouts go to Choco Taco from the US, as well as Tiger Nope, who isn't quite from Kansas City, but still gets a shoutout anyways. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 38, Sonic. The best Sonic in the world is Sonic's, as we all know. If I had talked about Sonic's just last year, I'd have said he was one of the best players to never win a major. But just this year alone, Sonic's won 3, Gommel 2023, Port Priority 8, and the Coinbox IRL. But today, I want to take a moment to shout out some other notable Sonics. Big shout out goes to the Sonic runner-up, Ken, who has undergone a serious level up recently. Additionally, Ken has also defeated Sonic's 2 biggest bracket demons in Spargo at Port 8 and Light at Watch the Throne, which I think is very cool. Other shoutouts go to Pelly from the UK, Taike from Japan, who I think is going to have a big breakout soon, as well as Supergirl Kells from Canada, who is retired technically, but you know. Another shoutout goes to Wrath from the US. And lastly, shoutout to Tony Z Tank from the Midwest. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 39, King Dedede. It's Christmas today, and you know what? Now that I think about it, King Dedede is actually really similar to Santa Claus. Did I purposefully plan for the D3 episode to be on Christmas knowing this? Absolutely not. The best D3 in the world is Zaki from Japan, and no, I'm not just saying that because it's Japan, hear me out on this one. Zaki went on one of the greatest recent runs from a DDD ever at Sumobato SP30, which had over 200 entrants. Zaki, after losing his second set of the tournament, went on an 8-set losers run, notching insane wins over Tadakotori, Kome, Momon, Sasusoro, and Kananabe before losing to Alice for 5th place. Zaki doesn't just have this to their name though, having winning records over global names like Kome, Suinoko, Aim, Hikaru, Tadakotori, and even Umeki and Yuzu. Shoutout goes to Kilogram Hours from Iowa, who is a fan of the channel. Hi Kilogram Hours. Follow and stay tuned for more parts.
The best player of every character in Smash, Part 40, Olimar. We've reached episode 40, yay us. The best Olimar in the world is Shuton. Here's the thing, the main question is whether or not Shuton or Dabuz is the better Olimar. The problem about this is that Dabuz mostly uses Rosalina unless he feels like he has such a massive matchup advantage to justify swapping to Olimar. To be 100% honest with you, I don't even remember the last time Dabuz got a Lumi ranked win with his Olimar. Shuton, on the other hand, still consistently co-mains Olimar and consistently gets great wins with him all the time. So for that, my pick for best Olimar is going to Shuton. Shoutout goes to Uame from Japan, who's gone on some very good runs lately, as well as Candle from the Midwest. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 41, Lucario. First things first, it goes without saying that the best Lucario in the world used to be Sue from Japan, who made waves with the character back in Ultimate's early days. And while Sue has taken a break from being in the public eye, he's returned recently, this time sporting mostly Terry with a little bit of Lucario still in there. However, nowadays, the best Lucario in the world is Armadillo from Canada. Armadillo has come extremely close to top 8ing majors multiple times now, first at LMBM 2023 where he got 17th, then at GAMO 2023 where he got 13th, and lastly at Battle of BC5 where he got 9th and picked up the best win of his career, his win over Shuton. Shoutouts go to Gachipi from Japan, who has the most points on shoe stats but who uses a lot of Sonic alongside his Lucario, as well as Vivi from the United States and Zamatron from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 42, R.O.B. This is the big one. Get it? Because R.O.B is big? I'll see myself out. The best R.O.B in the world is Zamba, who is truly one of Smash's young generational talents. Whether you've been following Zamba since his breakout performance at Smash World Tour, or if you became a fan when he won his first ever major at Crown III, there's no denying that Zamba is the best. It seems like the only hurdle left in Zamba's path is qualifying for an invitational. Shoutout goes to MK Big Boss from Mexico, who's undergone a massive level up as of late. Additional shoutouts go to Anathema from the US, who is still many people's favorite R.O.B, Sasusoro from Japan, who's been making big upsets lately, and SebPro101 from Australia, who I think is a truly underrated pick. Lastly, shoutout goes to Matoon3 from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 43, Toon Link. Can I just point out how all of the world's best Toon Links are centered in Japan? Of the top 6 Tinks, only one isn't Japanese, Marvelous Marco. All the others are in Japan, where Tink is a far more popular and far more successful character than either Young Link or Adult Link. What has Japan discovered about this character that no one else hasn't? Well, you may want to ask the best Tink in the world, Level 1 from Japan, who recently placed 3rd at a major with Solo Tink. That's extremely impressive, and he only lost to Mia as well as an extremely close Game 5 to Yoshidora. Speaking of Yoshidora, Level 1 actually has defeated Yoshidora before. I made an entire video on my channel solely about this run, so go watch it if you haven't already. Shoutouts for today are literally just going to go to every single other talented Tink in Japan. Seriously, I can't get over how this country has just figured this character out. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 44, Wolf. This is, once again, the tried and true battle of peaks versus consistency. The biggest peak of perhaps any modern Wolf was Jackal's run to 2nd place at Crown III, where he defeated multiple top players including Spargo and Shuton. However, Jackal infamously struggles with consistency, unlike his main competition, Ouch. Ouch, who just so happens to have the most points on shoe stats, is a far more consistent bracket threat, his big breakout tournament being Battle of BC4, but he actually remained an extremely solid bracket threat after that, dominating his scene and being an undisputed top Canadian player. So for that reason, I'm going to give Best Wolf to Ouch. Shoutouts, which by the way are not meant to be the next best wolves, they're just people I want to shout out for fun and not for rankings, are Orion from France, Keen from Chile, and Horst DW from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 45, Villager. We're on to the Smash 4 characters. How has time gone so fast? The best villager in the world is Kept from Japan, and even though he has been using more Isabelle lately, he's a villager main through and through. As far as today's meta goes, Kept has been at the forefront of villager for a long time now. Shoutouts go to Elam from the United States, who I feel like no one talks about despite them being absolutely cracked with great placements at big tournaments. Additional shoutout goes to Javi on Earth as well as Bobby Wasabi. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 46, Mega Man. Let's get this out of the way first, because a lot of people's first thought when they think of Mega Man will be Kameme. However, as many of you know, I only consider co-mains or above for this series, and since Kameme has basically fully swapped to solo Sora, I can't consider Kameme for Mega Man. The best Mega Man in the world is Peanut from the US, who boasts massive performances like his one at Riptide 2022 or DreamHack Dallas 2023. You know, last year, because it's 2024 now. Other shoutouts go to Repo from Japan, as well as MPG from the US, and one of the biggest shoutouts ever goes to Toffee from Kansas City, one of my favorite players to be around. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 47, Wii Fit Trainer. This one is probably going to be surprisingly controversial given how uncommon Wii Fit is. The best Wii Fit in the world is Oolong from the United States, who is a beast in his notoriously stacked region of MDVA, as well as defending it from invaders multiple times. Oolong also has decent placements at major tournaments, but my main headache for this entire episode is that none of these Wii Fit mains attend very many majors. My main shoutout today is going to go to John Numbers, who not only has the most points on shoe stats, but is honestly who I probably would have picked for this video, but I can't in good conscience because he just doesn't attend bigger tournaments. Another shoutout goes to Very Freezer from the Midwest. Honestly, other shoutouts just go to whoever the heck you guys want. It really doesn't matter. None of them attend anything. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 48, Rosalina Luma. These last few episodes have really made me realize just how unpopular every single Smash 4 newcomer is in Ultimate, except for the DLC. But yeah, it's Dabuz. I mean, really, what did you expect? Dabuz is the best. He's got the most points on shoe stats by a country mile, and oh, by the way, shoe stats is spelt like this, not like this. Just thought you should know. Oh, and I know Dabuz has said that he's gonna commit to Steve for 2024, but he hasn't done it yet, so he still counts for this episode, okay? Shoutouts for today are firstly going to go to Yuzu from Japan, who funnily enough also uses Min Min. Additionally, shoutouts go to the European pair of Solo from the Netherlands, as well as Homika from France. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 49, Little Mac. Oh boy. The main question of best Little Mac falls between either Peanut, the infamous YouTuber, or Tadako Tori, the Japanese Little Mac who is mostly known for almost making it into Watch the Throne. Honestly, the two players in terms of placements and points on shoe stats are really dang close. So I'm gonna use wins to determine this. Peanut's best wins are most likely Anathema, Apollo Kage, Base Mage, and Capitancito, while Tadako Tori has a laundry list of great wins over some of Japan's best. We're talking wins over Takara, I'm, Kept, and Umeki, as well as Abadango, and maybe most impressively, Ken. Wins over Hikaru, Neo, Senro, Ryuo, Gachipi, Huto, and lastly, Kameme. I could keep going, but I'm gonna stop it there for now. Tadako Tori has far better wins than Peanut does, and for that reason, I'm gonna give Best Little Mac to Tadako Tori. Shoutouts go to Quaz, who defeated Peanut at the Salt Box. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 50, Greninja. We're on episode 50, and thankfully today's is an easy episode. The best Greninja is Tarek, hands down. The German Greninja has pioneered the character's meta for 2023 and hopefully beyond, and he's got the most points on shoe stats. And since it's an easier episode and we have time, I want to go ahead and mention that shoe stats making these graphics is kind of what inspired me to make this series in the first place. I never really brought it up before, but that's why I reference them in nearly every episode. It's an homage. And again, as I've mentioned and proven multiple times, shoe stats is not my end-all be-all for who I pick, it's just my jumping off point and a point of reference. I would give a shout out to Rarhyur, but he mostly plays Sora now, so my actual shout outs are going to go to Ice Knight from the US, Mo from Mexico, who mostly competes online, and lastly Anarchy, also from the US. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 51, Mii Brawler. Guys, I messed up. Many people, when they think of Mii Brawler, will think of Rizeyasu. However, we only consider co-mains or above for this series, and in my Marth episode, I, myself, said that Rizeyasu was a Marth Byleth co-main with a Mii Brawler secondary, and so his Brawler doesn't count for this series. Of the top 5 Brawlers on shoe stats, Rizeyasu is a secondary, Esam is a secondary, J-Mafia is a secondary, and there's 2 Japanese players who I don't even know who they are. Guys, I'm so unbelievably screwed. The comments on this video are going to be so bad. For the sake of today's video, the best Mii Brawler in the world is Kid from France, who recently got a win over MKLeo at Sunrise 2023, as well as having wins on many of the best players in France. Kid is on an insanely big come up right now, so keep your eye on them. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 52, Mii Swordfighter. A lot of people would, rightfully, bring up Shisho, a Japanese player who is considered the best sword fighter over in Japan. However, I don't think Shisho can really be considered a co-main or above, being a Dr. Mario main with a Mii Swordfighter secondary. So with that said, the best Mii Swordie in the world is Aaron from North Dakota, who is indeed a Mii Swordie main through and through. Aaron's the #1 in North Dakota right now and has wins over players like Atada, JDV, MFA, Chunky Kong, Kiyarash, Epic Gabriel, Rocky, Naito Sharp, and more. So yeah, I'm giving best Mii Swordie to Aaron. Shoutout goes to H3K, ranked #4 on shoe stats, for reaching out to me on Twitter about this very topic. But hey, don't start doing that. This is a one-time thing, okay? Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 53, Mii Gunner. How is Gunner the easiest Mii to do? The best Mii Gunner in the world is Capitancito from the Dominican Republic, hands down. He's got the most points on shoe stats by a mile, and he's gotten wins over great top players before, including Sonics, and he's placed well at many good tournaments. His best run, in my opinion, being at Low Tide City 2023, where he got 2nd place as the 14th seed with wins over Skyjay, Teaser, Apollo Kage, and Meister. There are some other notable Mii Gunner players, but my only shoutout today is gonna go to DJ Dawn, who was one of my overall favorite players just ever. Dawn is just super funny, and I think that's awesome. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 54, Palutena. There are actually a ton of Palu players making waves lately, and this episode is definitely tricky. Of the top 5 Palus on shoe stats, I think it's between Chase, aka Yuno, and Jagaimo for the best Palu. Luis and Chag are good, just not quite there yet. And I also want to say that Roflo has had a really good end to 2023, but it's a bit early to say that he's the Palu GOAT. If he keeps this up though, he probably could be. Personally, in deciding between Jagaimo and Chase, I want to look at their recent results. Chase has had a bit of a slump lately, with somewhat disappointing finishes at LMMM 2023, the Big House 11, and Rise and Grind. To contrast, Jagaimo's end of 2023 has been great, winning Seibugeki 16, as well as placing 5th at Delta 5 and Delta 4, and lastly winning Delta 3. So for that reason, I'm gonna give best Palu to Jagaimo. Shoutout goes to Murabito from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 55, Pac-Man. The best Pac-Man in the world is still T from over in Japan, and yeah, even though he plays a lot of Kazuya, he's still definitely at least a co-main of Pac-Man. Even still, I know this pick will be slightly controversial as T isn't quite matching his previous peaks. There are a few good North American Pac-Mans. Pac-Men who make a good case for themselves, most recently Sinji at LMBM. However, T is the only one still top 8ing important tournaments, and no one's accomplished more with the character than T has. There's actually a lot of Pac-Men in Kansas City. We're kind of like the Pac-Man capital of America. So I've got 3 KC shoutouts. The first and biggest one goes to the Rocky Balboa, and another one goes to the Six Master. And lastly, my 3rd shoutout for KC Pac-Man is gonna go to Isaiah. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 56, Robin. The best Robin in the world is Leaf from over in Japan. There are likely 2 types of people watching this. The people who knew already I was going to say Leaf, and the people who have no idea who Leaf is. If you're in the latter category, you need to learn who Leaf is, and fast. Leaf is the rising star over in Japan who has been making huge waves with this character over there. Most famously upsetting Zachary at Delta number 5, which was Leaf's big breakout tournament, as he also defeated Lai, the Corrin who beat Spargo at SmashCon, and Atelier for a final placement of 13th as the 59th seed. Since then, Leaf has just been steadily improving and is definitely the best Robin in the world. I don't even really want to do shoutouts anymore because of how upset people get over them, but I guess I'm going to give one to Morocco Yo from Venezuela. Additionally, all of Kansas City because it feels like everyone is picking up this character as a pocket for some unknown reason. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 57, Shulk. Despite being a bit of a meme in the community, the best Shulk in the world is still Kome from Japan. Long story made very short, he's the only one who places relatively well at large tournaments, with a good 9th place finish recently at Mayasuma Top 15. But that doesn't mean that the other Shulks aren't good. Shoutouts for today are going to go to Jared is King 1 from the US, Elijahman from over in Canada, Kanaji from Down Under in Australia. I can't do that. Kanaji from down in Australia, and lastly Chumples from Kansas City, also known as the greatest player who ever lived of all time ever, a video that I made that definitely was not an April Fool's joke. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 58, Bowser Jr. The best Bowser Jr. in the world is TM7 Zap, who yes, is a big Wi-Fi warrior, but also boasts strong placements at offline tournaments and even an offline win over Riddles. The other junior mains are good, but aren't very active at the moment. But shoutouts will go to Yoda Cage, as well as Ketchup, and lastly one goes to Nodino from Missouri. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 59, Duck Hunt. You know, for one of Smash Ultimate's most uncommon characters, we actually have a lot of people to talk about. First, we have Raito from Japan, Wisdom from Kansas City, and Sekai Doggo from South America, all of whom don't really use Duck Hunt that much anymore, or don't play that much anymore. Speaking of inactive, we also have Big Duck Hunt Fan 7000, who has one of the biggest upsets of all time over Tweak at Gommel. Next up, we have Peru, Jagabata, and Fawn, all of whom are good Duck Hunts, but none of them are my pick for the best. That goes to Embo Z, who has some of the most consistent tournament placings with that character. And for that consistency and good placements, my pick for best Duck Hunt goes to Embo Z. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 60, Ryu. We've hit Part 60, and to reward me for it, I've been blessed with one of the easiest episodes I've done so far. The best Ryu in the world is obviously Ashimo. Ashimo has been a top 10, if not top 5, Japanese competitor for nearly all of 2022, 2023, and now probably 2024, with strong performances to start off Ashimo's new year. Honestly, the shoutouts really just go to the obvious ones like Vendetta or Aiken, as well as Undertone from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 61, Ken. I bet some of you guys forgot we were doing echoes like this, huh? But just like Ryu, the best representative of this Street Fighter character is the one from Japan, namely Takara. To be honest, a lot of the other Ken players are just not as active as I'd like them to be, and none have reached the heights that Takara has with the character. Shoutouts are actually going to be nearly the same as the Ryu episode, as the Shotos have an insane overlap in player base. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 62, Cloud. The best Cloud in the world, it's Spargo. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 63, Corrin. You know, a few months ago, I probably would have said that it was Neo, the Japanese Corrin who just so happens to have the most points on shoe stats. However, given recent trends, I'm actually going to go ahead and say that Shaddick from the United States is the best Corrin in the world. Neo has been in a pretty significant slump lately ever since SmashCon, while Shaddick has been on nothing but a meteoric rise, making top 8 at LMMM and the Big House, as well as winning Low Tier City 7 and Santa Paws. Not to mention he won the grudge match between the two of them at Super Smash Con. So for all of those reasons, I'm gonna give best Corrin to Shaddick. Shoutouts go to Lai, the other Japanese Corrin that beat Spargo at SmashCon, as well as Shampoo from South Kansas, and lastly the Killing Bat from Kansas City. 2 different regions, by the way. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, Part 64, Bayonetta. This one is a particularly tricky one, as some of you pointed out that it's between the Triforce of Lima, Bloom Forever, and Tamapi Daifuku, all of whom are a lot closer in skill than you might think, even being ranked similarly on shoe stats. This is actually a really tight race, but for my money, today, right now, I'm gonna give the best Bayo to Bloom Forever. Tamapi Daifuku did really well at Delta 7, but I think it's a little bit early to call him the Bayo GOAT. And while Lima is really good, Lima really needs to close that last little gap of a major win like Bloom has. Maybe the biggest shoutout I've ever given goes to Deathspade from Kansas City, who I might have just given this entire award if I gave in to my biases. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 65, Inkling. We've finally made it to the Smash Ultimate newcomers. Tell me, dear viewers, are you prepared for this series to end? The main toss-up for Best Inkling is between Showers and Shirayuki, both from Japan. I think it's a very close race, to be honest with you, but in the last few months of 2023, Shirayuki top-8'd several majors. And I think that gives Shirayuki a slight edge, so for that reason, I'm gonna give Best Inkling to him. Shoutouts for today are going to go to Colorado 8 from St. Louis, as well as Pandas MQ, and lastly Shockers, both of whom are from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 66, Ridley. The best Ridley in the world is Mezcal, who is the one Ridley placing really well, really consistently at really important EU tournaments. The fact that a European, who are infamous for struggling on algorithm rankings, managed to place first on shoe stats should tell you all you need to know. Shoutouts for today are going to go to the MDVA duo of Smub and Creepuba as well as Caden. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 67, Simon and Richter Belmont. The best Belmont in the world is still T3 Dom. Even though Dom has been a bit inactive lately, it's still recent enough to give Dom the title of best Belmont. Especially considering that no one else has accomplished what Dom has with the character. Shoutouts for today are going to go to Squid Plumber, obviously, as well as Melly, who's on a huge come-up lately. Additional shoutouts go to Karu, and lastly, we have Castle from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 68, King K. Rool. The best K. Rool player in the world is Lukewarm, formerly known as Kirby Kid. If you didn't know that Kirby Kid actually rebranded as Lukewarm, don't worry, I didn't know that either for an embarrassingly long time. But yeah, best K. Rool is pretty definitively Lukewarm, but a surprisingly close second place goes to Brujo, who could overtake Lukewarm in the future. A super special shoutout is gonna go to Onua from Kansas City. Why is it so special? Well, Onua is ranked on shoe stats for not 1, not 2, but 3 separate characters. 33 for K. Rool, 31 for the Belmonts, and 45 for Byleth, all while being self-employed as a full-time artist. Her art is dang good too. Talk about being multi-talented. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 69, Isabelle. Why did Isabelle have to be Part 69? This is not nice. A lot of people will probably bring up Kept in this discussion, as Kept has been playing more and more Isabelle lately. However, I actually consider Kept's Isabelle to be a secondary, and as we only consider co-mains or above for this series, his Isabelle doesn't qualify. And so, the best Isabelle in the world is Yaka from Switzerland. Yaka is the best player in Switzerland, and to this day, he's the only solo Isabelle main to make top 8 at a major and win a C tier or above tournament. And so, best Isabelle goes to Yaka. Shoutouts go to the American duo of Mr. Zircon as well as B. Rice, and lastly, we have Frisbee from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 70, Incineroar. The best Incineroar in the world is SkyJ, no contest. I think Collision 2023 itself will go down in Smash history as maybe the craziest major ever. And then, right afterwards, SkyJ makes top 6 at the last Smash Ultimate Summit. And then he went to LMBM this month and took Sonics to a Game 5, eventually placing 5th. In terms of a character tier placement and player skill ratio, SkyJ is the best player in the world. Still doesn't mean that Incineroar is a better bracket character than Palutena. That's just silly. Shoutouts are actually pretty difficult today, but I'm gonna go ahead and give one to Mystery Soul as well as Bullhall from Texas. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 71, Piranha Plant. We're finally to the DLC, the last stretch of this series. The best Piranha Plant in the world is Lucky from the United States. Lucky has one of Plant's best results ever, winning Warp Zone 2 over the likes of Doorstop, Raven King, Sir Dank, and Colorado 8. This meant that Lucky took home Plant's only victory at a C tier or above tournament. Shoutouts go to Brood from over in Japan, and lastly, a shoutout goes to Dimitri from Ireland. You typically don't hear very much about Irish Smash. They're a pretty underrepresented scene. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 72, Joker. The best Joker in the world is, say it with me folks, MKLeo. I feel like I don't have to explain this one, to be honest with you. MKLeo is synonymous with Joker. That's how iconic he is. So let's get a big shout out list instead to make up for it. The first two shoutouts go to the Japanese duo of Tsubaki and Goryoka, as well as the American duo of Naito Sharp and Omega, and the South Korean duo of Ashen and Linzel. And lastly, shoutouts go to both Lemon from Canada and Raven King from Chicago. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 73, Hero. The main question of best hero is between Beast Mode Paul from the US and Akakikusu from Japan. And to be honest, a few months ago I would have given it to Akakikusu. But recent victories over Shiny Mark Cola, Big D, Andres FN, Siski, and most notably Gluttony has propelled Beast Mode Paul just over Akakikusu as the world's best hero. Shoutouts go to, and buckle up, we've got a lot here, Kamisake from Japan, Nair from Mexico, Sparkle from the US, Spice also from the US, Vivi also from the US, and lastly Spoon from Kansas City, who only mains Hero because KC banned Steve and he's still ranked number 90 worldwide on shoe stats. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 74, Banjo and Kazooie. It's very surprising how, even though the question of best Banjo seems obvious to me, many people still don't know about this player. The best Banjo in the world is Toriguri from Japan, no question. Don't get me wrong, Raito is good and I'm sure Tweak's Banjo is fine, but no one can compete with Toriguri. I made an entire documentary on this player that details his entire competitive career, which you should really go watch if you haven't already. But long story short, he's the only Banjo player in the world to top 8 not 1, but 2 majors, the only one to do it with solo Banjo, and he's got the best wins out of any of the Banjo contenders. The title of Best Banjo can't go to anyone but Toriguri. Shoutouts for today are going to go to Wolfen from El Salvador, as well as Furinji from Iowa. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 75, Terry. The best Terry in the world is Riddles from Canada. And let's get the elephant in the room out of the way first. Riddles is most infamous for his Kazuya, but I still consider Terry to be at least a co-main or above for Riddles, and so he still qualifies for this series. And if you think that's a stretch, then don't worry, the Byleth episode is tomorrow, so save your anger until then. Shoutouts for today are going to go to Darkstalker from the UK, Aegis from over in Japan, and lastly, a shoutout goes to Andres FN from Spain. You see, I didn't forget about him in the Ken and Ryu episode, I was saving him for the Terry one. So you can stop yelling at me now, Spain. Please? Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 76, Byleth. I haven't had a controversial episode in quite a while. I'm giving the title of Best Byleth to MKLeo. Yes, I know that MKLeo said he won't be playing Byleth anymore, but he said that in regards to the future. As far as right now goes, he's used Byleth as recently as UFA versus Raflo. And even though he's used mostly Joker in these last few months, I think when it comes to all of 2023, he's still used Byleth enough to be considered a co-main. You think that's a stretch? Yeah, I do too. This does mean that MKLeo is the first player I've covered to win 2 separate episodes. You may also think of Rizeyasu, but he's been using Byleth less and less in favor of Marth. And fan of the channel, Justin Byleth, has actually changed his tag and is starting to main Steve. The 2 best solo mains left are Reno from Japan and Deox6 from Europe. Also, shoutout goes to Oniwa from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash Part 77, Min Min. A lot of people still think that Proto Banham is the best Min Min, and in my Lucina episode, I did give it to Proto because I didn't think he was inactive enough to not be considered. But also, I gave it to him because no one else had really stepped up into that mantle of top 8ing or winning majors. That's not the case with Min Min. The best Min Min in the world is Doramigi from Japan. Doramigi has filled the mantle that Proto Banham left behind, top 8ing several super majors back to back even just in 2024. Doremigi has yet to win a major, but I believe it will happen very soon. Shoutouts go to Omawatsu, also from Japan, as well as Justice from the United States, Zurzel, also from the United States, and lastly, shoutout to me, Rister Mice, from Kansas City. What, you thought I wasn't going to give myself a shoutout? I work hard for this family, dang it. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, part 78, Steve. Oh boy, the best Steve in the world. I wonder who it could be. It's Akola. Ranked number 1 in the world for 2023, Akola is the most dominant player in the scene, playing the most dominant character in the game, living in the most dominant region in the meta, Japan. If I listed off every notable Steve, I'd be here for 2 hours, so let's get the big ones. Shoutouts go to Onin and Syrup, obviously, as well as DD, all 3 of them being from the US. Lastly, shoutouts also go to Yaman Action from Japan and Big Chungus from Sweden. And since Kansas City not only banned Steve, but was the first region to ever do it statewide, let's give a memorial to all of the ex-Steve mains. Rest in peace to Spoon, Zell, Ramen Raymond, Shafir, and any others that I forgot. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, part 79, Sephiroth. This one is the hardest DLC character to do. The top 5 Sephiroths on shoe stats don't actually main him. Most notably, Tweak and Ken's Sephiroths are both solidly secondaries, not co-mains or above, so neither of them qualify. However, our saving grace is Ned, who is still definitely a Sephiroth main despite having a few secondaries. Ned has the best wins and highest tournament placings of any of the Sephiroth contenders. And so, I'm giving best Sephiroth to Ned. My main 2 shoutouts today are going to go to Shrix from Australia, probably the best solo Sephiroth, as well as M4E from Italy. Both of these players could potentially become the best Sephiroth in the world in the future. I think they just need to travel more. Also, shoutout goes to Dovahkiin Beast from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, part 80, Pyra Mythra. The best Pyra Mythra, aka Aegis, player in the world is Shuton from Japan. One of the true co-mains of Smash Ultimate, Shuton becomes the second person to win multiple episodes in this series for both Olimar and Aegis. Shoutouts for today are going to go to Cosmos from the US as well as Space from the Netherlands. And lastly, more shoutouts go to MJ Jesus as well as Nitrocide, both of whom are from Kansas City. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, part 81, Kazuya. The best Kazuya in the world is either between T from Japan or Riddles from Canada. But with T in a slump lately, and his best wins and placements being with Pac-Man, I think most people would agree that the title of best Kazuya should go to Riddles. This makes Riddles the 3rd and final player to win multiple episodes in this series, joining MKLeo and Shuton, this time for Terry and Kazuya. My 2 big shoutouts today are going to go to the 2 young prodigies of Kazuya, Wilds from the US, as well as Silsey, who's known as the Prince of Como. Lastly, shoutout goes to Campaign from Kansas City. Come back soon, Cam, we miss you. Follow and stay tuned for more parts. The best player of every character in Smash, part 82, Sora. The best Sora in the world is Kameme from Japan. No one has taken Sora to the heights that Kameme has, and I for one am very glad that Kameme finally found the character that clicks with him. My main shoutout today is going to go to Death Spade, who is not only our Kansas City shoutout for today, but who is also the best Sora in North America. I'll fight you on that. Just kidding, I'm sensitive. The other big shoutout for today goes to Rarkyor from Morocco, as well as Stroderame. This is not the last episode. Tune in tomorrow for the thrilling conclusion of this series, the best random in Smash Ultimate. Follow and stay tuned for the final part. The best player of every character in Smash, part 83, Random. Please do not take this episode very seriously. What do I mean by random? I mean someone who, when they look at the character select screen, pick the question mark. Not someone who just plays a lot of characters like Rizeyasu. The best random in the world is Kumaneko from France. Random is Kumaneko's 2nd most played character. And out of all the contenders, Kumaneko has used random for the most games and has the best win rate, winning 73% of 291 games. This is better than our runner-up, Bloom Forever. who has only played 183 games of random and has a lower win rate of 68%. My two shoutouts today are going to Lucachito, number 1 on shoe stats, despite the fact that I can't find any VODs of their random, as well as Hollow from the United Kingdom. Tomorrow, I'm releasing one more short to wrap up this series. So save your goodbyes until then. Follow and stay tuned for the farewell of this series. And so, the best player of every character series is finished. But 2 questions remain that I will answer in today's short. 1, will I ever come back to redo this series? And 2, what's next? I do not plan to come back and redo this series as players get better or worse. As far as right now goes though, I actually do have one revision. The only episode that I would go back and change is my Snake episode, which I gave to Apollo Kage, but I should have given to Hurt from Japan. I'll go over why in the comments of the YouTube short if you're interested. But the Snake episode is the only one where I believe my choice was wrong. Everything else, I stand by. So what's next for me? Well, that's up to you. Option A is making a series where I make a mini guide for every character. Option B is a series going over every character's best and worst matchup. And option 3 is a series where I review clips sent in by you, the viewers. Let me know what you want to see. Follow and stay tuned for more shorts. That's going to be it for today's video. Before I go, shout out to my patrons Seth Laster, Farskull223, Logan S, Persipom, Wawa, Mr. Sinister, and my tier 2 patrons Iltis and Diamond Blaze. Additionally, shout out my YouTube members Loco Soko, DJ Jr., Defective, Diarrhea, Fan of, Boston R, Iltis, Gone SSB, Kirby Fan, and my tier 2 members Mike G, Wu-Tang Forever, and Stormtrooper. Lastly, extra special thanks to my tier 3 patrons Ocean Man, who says Mr. Mice is sorry for playing Min Min, Mistybot, who says, in my opinion, Mii Gunner is high tier, and Fat Blizzard, who says Zomba is top 10. If you want to support me using any of these methods, links are in the description below. Don't miss tomorrow's upload, but until then, I've been Mr. Mice, and thank you all so very much for watching.